having insomnia again. Don't worry, I got you. Like you, I always have a hard time getting to sleep until I discovered listening to interesting stories in a peaceful and boring environment helps me fall asleep fast. So, before we begin, I want you to settle in. Find a comfortable position. Let your shoulders relax and take a slow, gentle breath. I know you've come here seeking rest, a gentle release from the noise and the hurry of the day. And I want you to know that you are in the right place. Don't worry about trying to fall asleep. That's my job. There is no pressure here, no goal you have to achieve. Your only task is to listen, to let the story wash over you like a soft, gentle rain on a tin roof. My voice will be your guide, and the story will be our path. It's a path that leads through a landscape of quiet mystery, through the vast, silent deserts of the American Southwest, under a canopy of brilliant, silent stars. So, just close your eyes if you haven't already. Feel the weight of your body being supported. Feel the stillness of the room around you. We are about to drift back in time to a simpler era, to a small town that was about to become the center of a story that would echo for generations. Let the world outside fade away. It's just you and me now, and the story that awaits. Let my voice be the anchor that keeps you grounded, even as your mind begins to drift. Don't worry, I will help you get sleepy. Let's begin. The high desert of New Mexico in the summer of 1947 was a land of immense and patient silence. It was a place where time itself seemed to slow down, measured not in the frantic ticking of clocks, but in the slow, deliberate crawl of a shadow across the sun-baked earth. The landscape was a vast canvas of muted colors, the pale sage green of the scrub brush, the dusty ochre of the soil, and the endless, aching blue of the sky. A blue so deep and pure, it felt as though you could fall upward into it forever. For William Mac Brazel, a rancher whose family had worked this hard, unforgiving land for generations, this silence was not an emptiness. It was a language. He could hear the whisper of the wind as it sifted through the sparse grasses, the lonely, ethereal cry of a hawk circling high overhead, the frantic, dusty scramble of a lizard darting under a rock. It was the rhythm of his life, a slow, steady pulse that beat in time with the turning of the seasons. His days were governed by simple, repeating patterns. He would rise before the sun, the air in his small, rustic ranch house still cool and sweet from the night. He would pull on his worn denim trousers and scuffed leather boots, their familiarity a small comfort in the pre-dawn darkness. The smell, boring coffee, strong and black, would slowly fill the small kitchen, mingling with the scent of wood smoke from the stove. His work was demanding, but straightforward. There were fences to mend, the brittle wire snapping in the harsh sun and needing constant attention. There was livestock to check, the sheep moving like a single, dusty cloud across the vast, open range, their placid, gentle nature a stark contrast to the ruggedness of the land itself. Mac Brazel was a man of the earth, practical and plain-spoken, his hands calloused and strong, his face a roadmap of lines etched by decades of sun and wind. He was not a man given to flights of fancy. He believed in what he could see with his own two eyes, what he could fix with his own two hands. In the middle of that long, hot June, a storm of truly epic proportions had descended upon the region. It was not a normal summer thunderstorm. This was a different beast altogether, a swirling, violent tempest born of colliding air masses over the desert plains. The sky, which had been a placid blue just hours before, had turned a bruised, malevolent shade of purple-gray. The wind had begun to howl, a low, mournful sound that built into a shrieking crescendo, bending the tough, resilient juniper trees and kicking up clouds of stinging red dust. Then came the lightning, not the distant, flickering kind, but great, jagged spears of blinding white light that tore the sky from horizon to horizon, their thunderous reports not just a sound, but a physical concussion that vibrated deep in the chest and rattled the very windows of the ranch house. The rain had come in hard, horizontal sheets, so dense it was like looking through frosted glass. It was a night of elemental fury, a night when the world felt ancient and untamed, a night to hunker down and simply endure. Mac and his son, Vernon, had sat in their small living room, the flickering light of a kerosene lamp casting long, dancing shadows on the walls, listening to the wild symphony of the storm, feeling the smallness of their own existence against such overwhelming power. A few days later, after the storm had passed and the sky had returned to its state of serene, indifferent blue, Mac and Vernon rode out on horseback to survey the damage and gather their scattered sheep. The air was washed clean, scrubbed fresh by the rain, and the desert smelled wonderful, a rich, complex perfume of wet creosote, sage, and damp earth. They rode slowly, their horses picking their way carefully across the damp, sandy soil, their eyes scanning the familiar landscape. It was on this slow, methodical ride, about 7 or 8 miles from the ranch house, that Vernon first spotted it, a strange glint of light on the ground, a reflection that didn't belong. It wasn't the dull shine of wet rock. It was something else. Curiosity piqued. They dismounted, their boots making soft sounds in the damp earth. What they found was not a single object, but a vast field of debris, a bizarre and inexplicable litter scattered over an area that Mac would later estimate was 3/4 of a mile long and several hundred feet wide. They walked through it in a state of quiet, mounting bewilderment. The material was unlike anything they had ever encountered. There were thin, flexible strips of a substance that looked like rubber, but felt different, stronger. There were pieces of a parchment-like material, tough and fibrous. Most peculiar were the small, lightweight beams, like balsa wood, but impossibly strong. Mac tried to whittle one with his pocket knife, and the blade couldn't even scratch its surface. There were no nails, no screws, no bolts. The pieces seemed to have been fitted together with some kind of tape adorned with strange, flower-like symbols in shades of purple and pink dot. And then there was the foil, sheets of a metallic foil-like substance, so thin it was almost weightless, yet incredibly resilient. Mac would take a piece, crumple it into a tight ball in his fist, and when he opened his hand, it would unfold itself, smoothing out instantly, leaving not a single crease or wrinkle. He and Vernon played with it, fascinated, their initial caution giving way to a childlike sense of wonder. They looked for signs of an engine, a propeller, any familiar piece of a conventional aircraft, but there was nothing. No heavy metal, no wires, no vacuum tubes, just this strange, light, impossibly strong litter, scattered across the silent desert floor, as if a great, intricate kite, made of unknown materials, had simply disintegrated in the storm. Not knowing what to make of it, Mac gathered up an armful of the more interesting pieces, the strange beams and the memory foil, and carried it back to the ranch. He stashed it in an old shed, thinking he might find a use for it some day, or perhaps show it to a neighbor. He was a practical man, after all, and his primary concern was his ranch, his sheep. He spent the next few weeks going about his business, the memory of the strange wreckage slowly fading into the background of his daily chores. Just another oddity in a land that was full of them. The sun beat down, the days grew long and hot, and the silence of the high desert reclaimed the land. But a seed had been planted, a question mark hanging in the quiet air. In a shed on a remote New Mexico ranch, a small pile of impossible material lay waiting, a quiet, physical testament to the strange and violent storm that had brought it to Earth, and a harbinger of the much larger storm of controversy and wonder that was about to break upon the unsuspecting town of Roswell. Imagine the deep, profound silence of that New Mexico desert after the storm. The air is clean and cool. The sky is a vast, endless dome of brilliant stars. The world is quiet. Let that silence enter your own mind. Let the noise and the chatter of your day fade away into that vast, peaceful emptiness. Mac Brazel has put the mystery aside for the night, and you can too. There is nothing to figure out, nothing to solve. There is only the stillness, the gentle, cool air, and the feeling of deep, profound peace. Let the silence be your blanket. Feel the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, as slow and steady as the turning of the stars in that desert sky. Allow yourself to drift on that rhythm into a place of deep, untroubled, and restorative sleep. Rest now. The story can wait. In this first part of our story, we were introduced to the quiet, predictable world of Mac Brazel, a New Mexico rancher whose life was dictated by the harsh rhythms of the desert. We felt the vastness of the landscape and the simple, practical mindset of a man living in tune with his environment. The narrative's first major event was a thunderstorm of unusual and terrifying intensity, an atmospheric prelude to the strange discovery that would follow. Weed walked with Mac and his son through the debris field, experiencing their slow, mounting bewilderment as they encountered materials that defied all known explanation. The story concluded with Mac, a pragmatic man, stashing away this impossible evidence, content for the moment to let the mystery lie, unaware that he was now the custodian of a secret that would soon captivate the entire world. The first week of July baked the small town of Roswell in the lazy, light afternoon sun. The heat radiated in shimmering waves from the asphalt streets, and the town moved at a slower, more deliberate pace. It was a town of returned soldiers and their young families, a community anchored by the Roswell Army airfield, a place of power and importance in the new atomic age. It was in this atmosphere of sleepy post-holiday calm that Mac Brazel decided to drive into town for supplies. He had been thinking more and more about the strange debris out on his ranch. The stories were everywhere now, in the newspapers and on the radio. Sensational tales of flying saucers being spotted all over the country. The coincidence felt too strong to ignore. While in the town of Corona, he mentioned his find to his uncle, who urged him to report it. It was, he argued, a matter of civic duty. Reluctantly, Mac agreed. On Sunday, July 6th, he loaded some of the debris into his pickup truck and made the long, dusty drive to Roswell, to the office of Sheriff George Wilcox. Sheriff Wilcox was a man accustomed to dealing with the mundane realities of a small town, disputes over cattle, the occasional drunk on a Saturday night. He listened with a patient, practiced skepticism as the quiet, earnest rancher described his strange discovery. But when Brazel showed him a piece of the strange, lightweight beam and the uncreasable memory foil, the sheriff's skepticism began to waver. This was beyond his experience. He picked up the telephone, its black bakelite cool against his hand, and made a call to the one place in town equipped to handle things that were strange and potentially important, the Roswell Army Air Field. He spoke to the duty officer, explaining the situation in low, measured tones. The base, he was told, would send someone to investigate. That someone was the base intelligence officer, a man named Major Jesse Marcel. Major Marcel was a decorated veteran of the Second World War, a man who had flown dozens of combat missions. In the Pacific, he was sharp, observant, and not easily rattled. He drove into town, met with Sheriff Wilcox, and examined the peculiar material Mac Brazel had brought with him. He, too, was baffled. He had seen wreckage from every kind of aircraft imaginable, both American and foreign, and this was like none of it. His curiosity professionally piqued. He decided he needed to see the debris field for himself. Along with another officer, a counterintelligence corps agent named Sheridan Cabot, Marcel accompanied Brazel on the long, bumpy drive back out to the Foster Ranch. The landscape grew more and more sparse, the signs of civilization fading away until there was nothing but the vast, empty expanse of the desert under the immense, star-dusted bowl of the night sky. They arrived late and spent the night at Brazel's small, rustic ranch house. The next morning, Monday, July 7th, Brazel led them out to the site. As Marcel walked the debris field, the full scale of the event struck him. The wreckage was scattered over an enormous area, glittering in the morning sun. He spent hours carefully gathering samples, his initial professional curiosity slowly transforming into a sense of profound awe and excitement. He was convinced this was no weather balloon, no conventional aircraft. This was something entirely new, something extraordinary. He filled his staff car with as much of the material as it could hold. On the drive back to Roswell that evening, he made a detour to his own home. He burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement, and woke his young son, Jesse Jr. Spreading the strange fragments on the kitchen floor, he told his son that he might be seeing a piece of a real flying saucer. The boy would never forget that night, the feel of the strange, light materials, and the sight of what looked like small I-beams covered in faint, purple-hued symbols, a kind of geometric, hieroglyphic writing. The next morning, Tuesday, July 8th, the atmosphere at the Roswell Army Airfield was electric. Major Marcel brought the debris to his commanding officer, Colonel William Butch Blanchard. After examining the material and hearing Marcel's report, Colonel Blanchard made a fateful decision. He was convinced that what they had recovered was not of this world. He instructed the base's public information officer, First Lieutenant Walter Port, to draft a press release and deliver it immediately to the local radio stations and newspapers. Lieutenant Hart, following his orders, typed up the short, stunning announcement. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that the many rumors regarding flying discs had become a reality yesterday, when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group, we had been fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of a local rancher. The press release was sent out over the wire services. For a few brief, electrifying hours, the world believed. The news flashed across the country and around the globe. Roff captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region, screamed the headline of the Roswell Daily Record. Phones at the airbase began to ring incessantly. Reporters, military officials, and curious citizens all wanted to know more. The story was incredible, paradigm-shifting, and it had come with the official stamp of the United States Army Air Forces. Colonel Blanchard ordered Major Marcel to load the debris onto a B-29 Superfortress and fly it immediately to his own superior, Brigadier General Roger Ramey, at the 8th Air Force Headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas. The evidence needed to be seen by higher command. But even as Marcel's plane was taking off, a new set of orders was coming down from the highest levels of the military. A lid was being slammed shut on the story as quickly and as forcefully as it had been opened. By the time Major Marcel landed in Fort Worth, the narrative had been completely rewritten. He was met on the tarmac and escorted to General Ramey's office. He walked in, expecting to brief the general on his extraordinary find. Instead, he was stunned to see that the debris he had so carefully collected was gone. Laid out on a large map on the office floor was something else entirely. The tattered, pathetic-looking remains of a common weather balloon and its radar target. A flimsy kite made of balsa wood and foil-backed paper. Reporters and photographers were brought in. General Ramey calmly and authoritatively explained to them that the whole affair had been a simple mistake. He explained that an enthusiastic but inexperienced officer on his staff, referring to Marcel, had misidentified the wreckage of a weather balloon. He held up a piece of the radar kite for the cameras, demonstrating its flimsy nature. Major Marcel was ordered to kneel down and pose for photographs with the wreckage, his face a mask of confusion and quiet humiliation. Friend, he knew this was not what he had found. He knew he was participating in a lie. But he was a soldier, and he followed his orders. The press conference was a success. The story was officially corrected. The flying disc had been nothing more than a weather balloon. The news cycle moved on. The world breathed a collective sigh of relief, chuckled at the Roswell base's overexcitement, and forgot. The mystery, it seemed, was solved. But for the men who had been there, for Mac Brazel, and especially for Jesse Marcel, the real mystery was thus beginning. The memory of what they had actually seen and touched would linger, a quiet, persistent question mark that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. In this second chapter, the mystery of the strange debris moved from by the quiet isolation of Mac Brazel's ranch into the public sphere. We followed the story as it was passed from a bewildered rancher to a skeptical sheriff, and finally into the hands of the United States military. We felt the rising excitement of Major Jesse Marcel, an experienced intelligence officer who became convinced that he had found something extraordinary, something not of this world. The story reached a dramatic peak with the official press release from the Roswell Army Airfield, a stunning announcement that they had captured a flying disc. But this peak was immediately followed by a steep and sudden fall. In a dramatic reversal, the military retracted the story, claiming it was all a mistake, a simple misidentification of a weather balloon. The chapter concluded with a powerful image of Major Marcel being forced to pose with the manufactured evidence. A man forced to deny his own senses and participate in the birth of a cover-up, leaving us with a profound sense of intrigue and the lingering question, what was the real truth? Let the image of the press conference fade away. The flashbulbs have stopped popping. The reporters have gone home. The official story has been told. A quiet calm descends once more. The excitement and the confusion are over for now. Allow yourself to feel that sense of calm. Let go of the questions, the contradictions. There is nothing for you to resolve. Let the quiet authority in the general's voice be a strange kind of comfort, a voice that says everything is under control. Everything is explained. There is no need for you to worry. Your only concern now is your own rest. Feel the stillness settle around you. Feel the gentle weight of your body, secure and supported. Listen only to the sound of your own quiet breathing. Let it be the only story you follow, a simple, soft, and gentle rhythm leading you away from the world of thought and into the peaceful, silent landscape of deep sleep. Rest now. While the official story of the Roswell incident had been neatly packaged and put to rest with the weather balloon explanation back in the small, sun-drenched town itself, a different kind of story was beginning to take shape. It was not a story that appeared in the newspapers or on the radio. It was a story told in whispers, in hushed conversations over backyard fences, in the shadowed corners of the local diner, in looks exchanged between neighbors that held a universe of unspoken questions. It was a story that suggested there was more to the incident than just some strange metallic debris. It was a story that whispered of boaties. At the center of this quiet, unsettling new chapter was a young man named Glenn Dennis, a mortician who worked at the Ballard Funeral Home, a place that, by its very nature, was a keeper of the town's most solemn secrets. Glenn's life, up until that point, had been as predictable as the slow, steady toll of a funeral bell. He was a quiet, diligent young man, learning the family trade. His days were spent in the hushed, lavender-scented atmosphere of the funeral home, a world of quiet grief and somber rituals. He knew the families of Roswell in their moments of greatest sorrow. He was a professional, discreet and compassionate. But in the midst of that strange week in July of 1947, his ordinary world was punctured by a series of bizarre and unsettling events. It began with a phone call, one of several he would receive that day from the Roswell Army airfield. The caller was the base's mortuary officer, and his questions were peculiar, almost frantic. He wanted to know about the funeral home's availability of small, child-sized caskets. He asked how many they had in stock. Glenn, though puzzled, answered professionally. Then the questions became even stranger. The officer wanted to know about the best methods for preserving bodies that had been exposed to the elements for several days. He asked about the chemical reactions of embalming fluid on tissues that had been damaged, and he stressed this part were not normal. Glenn was perplexed. He knew of no plane crash, no accident involving children from the base. He tried to ask for more information, but the officer was evasive, his voice tense and guarded. He said only that it was for a special, top-secret operation. The calls left Glenn with a deep sense of unease. Later that day, he had to drive an injured airman from the base hospital back to the funeral home. While at the base, he saw something that heightened his anxiety. He saw unusual military activity, trucks coming and going, armed guards stationed in places they normally weren't. He saw large, sealed crates being loaded onto a transport plane. He caught a glimpse of some of the strange, metallic wreckage being carried under a tarp. The same kind of material Mac Brazel had described. The most disturbing part of his story, the part he would recount with a tremor in his voice for decades to come, involved a nurse he knew, a young woman who worked at the base hospital. He ran into her in the hospital cafeteria. She seemed agitated, distressed. She agreed to meet with him later, away from the base. That evening, they met in a quiet coffee shop. The nurse was terrified. Her hands shook as she held her coffee cup. She told Glenn, in a hushed, terrified whisper, that he needed to forget everything he had seen and heard. She told him that she had been present at a preliminary autopsy performed at the base on something that had been recovered from the crash site. She described seeing bodies, small, frail bodies, not human. She spoke of large, pear-shaped heads, big, dark, recessed eyes, and small, slit-like mouths. She described hands with only 4 slender fingers. She told him the smell in the room was nauseating, and that the doctors performing the examination were baffled and horrified as she described this scene. She sketched a crude drawing of the being's hand on a napkin, her own hand trembling. She told Glenn that she and everyone else involved had been sworn to an absolute secrecy that felt more like a threat. They were told that if they ever spoke of what they had seen, they would be taken to a place where no one would ever find them. She was being transferred to a new post in England immediately. She looked at Glenn with terrified eyes and told him, "I'm a nurse, and I have a soul. But I'll tell you this, if you ever loved me, or ever felt anything for me, don't ever talk to me again if you see me on the street." And then she was gone. Glenn Dennis never saw or heard from her again. This encounter left Glenn in a state of profound shock and fear. The strange phone calls, the unusual activity at the base, and now this terrifying first-hand account from the nurse, all coalesced into a single, unbelievable conclusion. The military hadn't just recovered a craft, they had recovered its crew. For years, Glenn Dennis kept this story to himself, locked away, a secret too dangerous and too incredible to share. The town of Roswell slowly returned to its sleepy normalcy. The weather balloon story became the official, accepted truth. Life went on, but the whispers never entirely faded. Other stories began to circulate, fragmented and unconfirmed. People, too, lived near the crash site, spoke of a second, more significant crash site being cordoned off by the military, a site that was scrubbed clean with a terrifying efficiency. There were stories of military personnel being debriefed and sworn to secrecy under threat of severe penalties. The town of Roswell became a place of quiet, unspoken knowledge. The official narrative was one thing, but the local narrative, the one told in hushed tones, was something else entirely. It was a story of a profound and unsettling mystery, a story that the townspeople learned to live with, a story that became a part of the local folklore, like a ghost story tied to an old house. The mundane life of the town continued, the high school football games, the Sunday church services, the county fairs, but underneath it all lay this shared, secret history. The story, whispered by Glenn Dennis and others, was a false peak, pool of a different kind. It was not a promise of revelation, but a descent into a deeper, more troubling mystery. It suggested a cover-up far more profound than merely hiding a secret balloon project. It hinted at a truth so reality-shattering that the government would go to any lengths to keep it contained. For decades, these whispers remained just that, whispers in the desert wind, waiting for a new generation of researchers to come and listen, to ask the questions that the people of Roswell had learned to keep to themselves. In this third part of our Roswell story, we moved away from the official military narrative and into the quiet, hushed world of the town itself. We focused on personal and unsettling experience of Glenn Dennis, a local mortician whose ordinary life was disrupted by a series of strange events. Through his story, we heard the whispers that suggested a far deeper secret was being concealed. The strange inquiries about child-sized caskets, the heightened security at the airbase, and the terrified first-hand account from a nurse about the discovery of small, non-human bodies all painted a chilling picture. This chapter was not about a confirmed truth, but about the power of rumors and the birth of the more speculative and more profound elements of the Roswell legend. It concluded with Glenn Dennis carrying the weight of this terrible secret, a secret that would lie dormant for decades, transforming the official weather balloon incident into a deeply unsettling local ghost story, a mystery that permeated the very atmosphere of the town. Let the whispers of Roswell fade into the quiet of the night. The stories are unsettling, the secrets deep, but they are stories from long ago. You can let them go now. Imagine the deep peace of the desert at midnight, a vast and silent landscape that keeps its secrets well. There is a great calm in that silence. Allow yourself to become a part of it. Let the quiet of the desert seep into your mind, calming the ripples of your thoughts. There are no more secrets to uncover tonight, no more whispers to decipher. Your only task is to embrace the stillness. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest, a soft and steady rhythm. Let that simple, peaceful rhythm be your only focus, guiding you gently down, 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 into a place of deep, silent, and wonderfully peaceful sleep. Rest now. For 30 years, the Roswell incident lay dormant, a curious piece of local history, a half-forgotten tale of a weather balloon and a brief flurry of flying saucer excitement. The speculative whispers of bodies and cover-ups remained confined to the memories of a few quiet townspeople. The world moved on. The Cold War intensified. The space race began. And the idea of alien visitors became the stuff of science fiction movies, not official military press releases. But in the late 1970s, a new kind of investigator, the civilian UFO researcher, began to dust off the old cold case. And as they did, a new narrative began to form. One that would force the United States government to finally provide a more detailed, and in many ways, more extraordinary explanation for the events of that strange summer in 1947. That explanation had a name, Project Mogul. That understand Project Mogul, we must drift back once more to the tense, anxious atmosphere of the late 1940s. The world had just emerged from one global conflict and was already bracing for another. Put the Soviet Union, America's former ally, was now its greatest adversary, a vast, secretive empire behind an iron curtain. In August of 1949, the Soviets would detonate their first atomic bomb, a terrifying development that shook the United States to its core. But even before that, the American military was desperate for a way to monitor Soviet progress, to listen for the telltale signs of a nuclear test from thousands of miles away. The problem was one of physics. The sound waves produced by a nuclear detonation travel through the atmosphere, but they are often faint and distorted by the time they reach distant sensors. A team of geophysicists, led by a man named Dr. Charles Moore, proposed a radical, ingenious solution. Their theory was that a specific layer of the upper atmosphere, the stratopores, could act as a sound channel, allowing low-frequency acoustic waves to travel for immense distances with very little loss of strength. The challenge was getting a microphone up there and keeping it there. Their solution was Project Mogul. It was a top-secret, high-altitude balloon project, but these were not ordinary weather balloons. They were massive, complex arrays, chains of multiple balloons strung together, lifting a long, trailing tail, due of scientific equipment. This equipment included sensitive microphones to listen for the sound waves, and, crucially, radar reflectors to allow the military to track the balloon's position. These radar reflectors were designed by a toy company, and they were strange, flimsy-looking contraptions made of balsa wood sticks, metallic foil paper, and reinforced tape. The life of a scientist on Project Mogul was one of secrecy, frustration, and painstaking work. Their launches took place from the Alamogordo Army Airfield in New Mexico, not far from Roswell. The work was often tedious. They would spend long hours in workshops, assembling the delicate balloon arrays, their fingers growing numb from handling the brittle materials. They would then transport the massive, uninflated balloons out into the harsh desert environment, a place of extreme temperatures and sudden, violent winds, conditions that were far from ideal for launching enormous, fragile objects into the sky. A launch was a tense, carefully choreographed event. A sudden gust of wind at the wrong moment could tear the delicate polyethylene of the balloons, sending their expensive, top-secret equipment crashing back to Earth. Many of the early flights failed, but on June 4th, 1947, a launch designated as Flight Number 4 was successful. A massive array of neoprene balloons lifted off from Alamogordo, carrying its long tail of microphones and radar reflectors, and began its silent, high-altitude drift eastward. It was this array, the Air Force would later explain, that was the true identity of the wreckage Mac Brazel discovered on his ranch weeks later. After being tracked for some time, the balloon array had dropped out of sight and was presumed to have crashed somewhere in the remote desert. The materials Mac Brazel described so vividly, the tough, rubber-like strips from the neoprene balloons, the strong, lightweight wooden beams, and the metallic foil-like paper from the radar targets, and the tape with strange, flower-like markings which were, in fact, a product of the toy company that manufactured it, were all, according to the Air Force, perfectly consistent with the components of a Project Mogul balloon array. This explanation provided a tidy, logical solution to the first part of the mystery. The material was indeed strange and unfamiliar to a rancher's eye, because it was part of a top-secret military experiment. Pound, the military's bizarre behavior, the initial excitement, the intense secrecy, and the quick reversal of the story also made perfect sense in this context. They weren't trying to cover up a crashed alien spacecraft. They were trying to protect one of their most sensitive, top-secret projects for spying on the Soviet Union. The weather balloon story was a convenient and plausible lie, a cover story for a cover story. In the paranoid atmosphere of the early Cold War, protecting the secret of Project Mogul was a national security imperative of the highest order. This official explanation, however, arrived decades too late to stop the growth of the Roswell legend. By the time the Project Mogul report was declassified and released in the mid-1990s, the story of aliens and a government cover-up was too deeply ingrained in the public consciousness. For believers in the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the Mogul explanation was seen as just another, more sophisticated layer of the cover-up. They pointed to the lingering inconsistencies, the witness testimonies that Mogul couldn't explain. How could a balloon project account for the Mortician's story about child-sized caskets and alien bodies? The Air Force addressed this as well, attributing these later, more sensational tales to the conflation of memories over many years. The blending of the 1947 balloon crash with a separate, later military plane crash in the area where several airmen were killed, and the simple, powerful human tendency to embellish stories over time. Project Mogul casts a long, rational shadow over the events of 1947. It presents a plausible, terrestrial explanation, a story rooted not in science fiction, but in the ultra-real fears, unsecret conflicts of the Cold War. It suggests that the mystery was one of human secrets, not otherworldly visitors. And yet, the shadow is not entirely complete. For some, it leaves too many questions unanswered, too many strange coincidences, unexplained. It stands as the official solution, a logical and well-documented peak of understanding in our journey. But for many, the path continues beyond it into the deeper, more ambiguous territory of unconfirmed testimony and the enduring, tantalizing possibility that something truly extraordinary did, in fact, fall from the storm-racked skies of New Mexico that summer. In this fourth chapter, we explored the official terrestrial explanation for the Roswell incident, the top-secret Cold War experiment known as Project Mogul. We journeyed back to the tense atmosphere of the late 1940s and understood the immense pressure the US military was under to spy on the Soviet nuclear program. We saw how a team of scientists developed an ingenious, if strange-looking, high-altitude balloon array to listen for atomic blasts from thousands of miles away. The story presented a logical and detailed solution to the mystery of the strange debris, explaining that the unfamiliar materials found by Mac Brazel were simply the components of one of these secret devices. This explanation tidily accounts for the military's bizarre behavior. The initial secrecy and the quick weather balloon cover story were not to hide aliens, but to protect one of their most vital intelligence projects. Project Mogul stands as the official, rational conclusion to the physical evidence. Yet, as we saw, it arrived decades too late to quell the powerful myth that had already taken root, leaving a lingering shadow of doubt and mystery. Let the complex details of Project Mogul dissolve. the science, the secrets, the Cold War intrigue. You can let it all go. The official explanation has been offered. There is a sense of order in it, a sense of a puzzle being solved. Embrace that feeling of order, of resolution. There are no more conflicting stories to untangle tonight. There is only the simple, peaceful state of rest. Imagine the serene image of one of those great balloons floating silently in the stratosphere, high above the clouds, high above the noisy, troubled world. It is calm and quiet up there. Let your own mind float up to that place of stillness. Let the gentle currents of the upper atmosphere become the gentle rhythm of your breathing, carrying you effortlessly into a state of deep, peaceful, and untroubled sleep. It is time to rest. The story of Roswell, as we have seen, is not one story, but many. It is a branching river of narratives, with tributaries of fact, speculation, official explanations, and deeply personal testimony. The final chapter of our journey is not about what happened in the desert in 1947, but about what happened in the decades that followed. It is the story of how a brief, quickly suppressed local news item transformed into one of the most powerful and enduring myths of the modern age. It is the story of the story itself. For 30 years, the incident lay like a sleeping giant. The official weather balloon explanation was largely accepted, and the memories of the event remained the quiet, private property of a few individuals like Jesse Marcel and Glenn Dennis. But in the late 1970s, the giant began to stir. The awakening was largely due to the tireless efforts of a small group of civilian researchers and authors. Stanton Friedman, a nuclear physicist turned UFO investigator, was one of the first. He was tenacious, refusing to accept the official story. He tracked down Jesse Marcel, now a retired lieutenant colonel living a quiet life, and interviewed him at length. It was in these interviews that Marcel, free from his military oath, first went on the public record with his conviction that the material he had recovered was not of this earth. This testimony from a high-ranking intelligence officer who was there at the very beginning was explosive. It was the spark that reignited the cold case. Authors like Charles Berlitz and William Moore followed, publishing books that brought the Roswell story, including the more sensational tales from witnesses like Glenn Dennis, to a mass audience for the first time. Suddenly, Roswell was no longer just a forgotten local incident. It was a phenomenon. The story began to grow, to evolve, to take on new life in the fertile soil of the public imagination. It became a powerful symbol of a new kind of modern suspicion, a deep-seated mistrust of official narratives. The story resonated powerfully in an America that had been through the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal. The idea that the government would lie to its citizens, that it would engage in a massive cover-up to protect a profound secret, no longer seemed outlandish. To many, it seemed entirely plausible. Roswell became the archetypal conspiracy theory, the parent from which 1,000 others would spring. It captured the public's imagination because it spoke to a deep human need, the desire to believe that there is something more, that we are not alone in the universe, and that the world holds secrets far grander and more mysterious than our everyday lives suggest. The town of Roswell itself began to change, once ambivalent, even embarrassed by its association with flying saucers. The community slowly began to embrace its unique identity. Tourism grew. A UFO museum and research center was opened in an old movie theater on Main Street. Local businesses adopted alien-themed names and logos. The streetlights were adorned with the images of stylized, large-eyed aliens. The sleepy desert town had found a new economy, a new purpose, as the undisputed capital of UFO culture. Every July, thousands of pilgrims, a mix of serious researchers, curious tourists, and true believers dressed in elaborate alien costumes, descend upon the town for the annual UFO festival, a celebration of the mystery that put their small community on the galactic map. The legacy of Roswell, therefore, is a dual one. On one hand, there is the historical event, a puzzle with a plausible, if complex, terrestrial solution in the form of Project Mogul. It is a story of Cold War secrecy, military procedure, and the misidentification of a top-secret device. It is a fascinating piece of 20th century history. But on the other hand, there is the myth, and the myth is, in many ways, more powerful and more significant than the event that inspired it. The myth of Roswell is a modern folk tale. Like the ancient myths of gods and monsters, it attempts to explain our place in the cosmos and grapple with profound questions about knowledge, power, and belief. It explores the blurry line between what is real and what we want to be real. As we conclude our journey, we are left not with a simple answer, but with a deep and contemplative mystery. Perhaps the truth of what fell on Mac Brazel's ranch is less important than the story it became. The story of Roswell is a reflection by ourselves, our hopes, our fears, our suspicions, and our boundless capacity for wonder. It is a testament to the idea that a single, strange event, a bit of glittering debris found under a summer sky, can ripple outward through time, gathering layers of meaning until it becomes something far grander, something that challenges our understanding of the world and our place within it. The silence of the New Mexico desert once held a secret. Now it holds a legend, and that legend, like the stars that blanket that desert sky, continues to shine, inviting us to look up, to wonder, and to dream of possibilities beyond our own small world. In this final chapter of the Roswell saga, we explored the enduring and powerful legacy of the 1947 incident. We saw how a forgotten local event was resurrected by dedicated researchers in the late 1970s, transforming it from a historical footnote into a global phenomenon. We examined how the story grew into a powerful modern myth, tapping into a growing public mistrust of official narratives and fulfilling a deep human desire to believe in mysteries beyond our world. The narrative showed how the town of Roswell itself embraced this new identity, becoming a unique cultural landmark. The story concludes not by solving the mystery, but by appreciating it. It leaves us with the understanding that the Roswell legacy is twofold: a fascinating historical event with a plausible terrestrial explanation, and a powerful, enduring myth that speaks more about our own hopes, fears, and capacity for wonder than it does about alien visitors. The story is now complete. The journey from a dusty ranch to a global myth has reached its end. Let the many layers of the tale, the facts and the fictions, the whispers and the official reports, all merge and dissolve into a single, peaceful state of rest. There are no more questions to ask, no more timelines to follow. The mystery has been laid to rest for the night. You can now lay your own thoughts to rest as well. Imagine you are standing in that vast New Mexico desert at night. Look up at the sky. It is a brilliant, silent tapestry of countless stars. It is a vision of profound peace and infinite possibility. Let the grandeur and the silence of that starry sky fill your mind, washing away all the small concerns of the day. Feel yourself becoming a part of that vast, quiet peace. Your only task now is to breathe slowly and deeply, and to let go. Allow the gentle pull of sleep to draw you into its quiet, comforting embrace. The story is over. Your time for rest has come. Sleep now. Sleep deeply and sleep well.